Just yesterday was a very exciting day to be a Star Wars fan as Disney Plus officially launched by Disney and of course Lucasfilm for the new Star Wars TV series, Star Wars The Mandalorian. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, in this video, we will be going over a full spoilers review of episode 1 of season 1 for The Mandalorian. I will be going over my personal favorite scenes, what I thought about the actual visuals, and of course how the acting was done, everything ranging from the characters, the comedy, the action, everything that's involved with episode 1 of The Mandalorian and connections to some Star Wars lore that's going to actually be very exciting to a lot of hardcore fans out there. So if you guys don't want to be spoiled about episode 1, if you have not seen it, I do highly suggest that you guys exit out of this video right now. Now, I want to go over one of my favorite scenes that really is a callback to that of Star Wars A New Hope, at least in my opinion, in the cantina scene on Tatooine back in 1977. Again, I will say that when you look at episode 1 for The Mandalorian so far, when you examine the episode, frame by frame, you can really see that this episode of The Mandalorian directly parallels the entire look of Star Wars A New Hope. I don't know about you guys, but there's something about The Mandalorian episode 1 that brings me back to the days of Star Wars A New Hope back in 1977. The overall tone that George Lucas aimed for is actually the same exact tone here for The Mandalorian episode 1. Now, the cantina scene at the very beginning of this episode is exactly what I'm really kind of referencing here, is that this cantina scene, in a way, in my point of view, directly parallels that of Star Wars A New Hope, where the Mandalorian comes into the bar, and he's just standing there, he's looking for a bounty, and that, of course, we'll get to in just a second, but one of the characters that actually speaks Huttese, alright, the language of the Hutts, begins to bother him about his drink. And this also parallels of how, we had that confrontation between Luke Skywalker and the other character in Star Wars A New Hope, and everybody else involved in the cantina scene and how Obi-Wan Kenobi cut off his arm. In the Star Wars The Mandalorian episode 1, we have a very similar situation where there's even a moment in which one of the characters literally gets cut in half, where the Mandalorian throws him out the door and closes it, and that's exactly how it parallels the other character in Star Wars A New Hope losing his arm. Now, what I like about this is that this sets up the dark tone of The Mandalorian. In fact, Jon Favreau really wanted to make this movie darkest as possible, and that's what he wanted to do by also inserting a lot of expanded universe material. Now, this episode actually contains many different pieces of Star Wars lore, as well as, of course, how it takes place roughly a couple of years after the events of Return of the Jedi. So this is the first post-Return of the Jedi Star Wars live-action project / TV series that we have seen so far, where there's even references about how the Empire is gone and now it no longer exists, and the remnants of the Empire essentially are a part of some crime syndicates out there. And that's what's really exciting about this film, is that you do get to explore how the bounty hunters are on their own, they're doing their own thing, how they're not really associated with the Empire in any way, shape, or form, and they have to do their own way of gaining credits and getting rewards. Now, that leads me to the comedy, alright? The comedy, I think, is pretty spot on. I think that this character called Mythrol, who is basically an aqua, like some kind of like aqua-looking fish design with blue skin. If you guys know exactly who I'm talking about, he's based within the cantina scene when the Mandalorian is escorting him across the surface of that world, leading him to his own ship, where he then freezes him in carbonite. Once again, another nice callback to that of Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, where we had Han Solo frozen in carbonite. Now we have Mythrol and his family and other characters frozen in carbonite as well. Now, the comedy of episode 1 mainly has to do with Mythrol, and that's, of course, the first, I would say, 7 to 13 minutes of the episode, right? So Mythrol is actually one of the bounties that, the Mandalorian's hunting for. He gets him inside of that cantina, brings him on board of a ship, freezes him in carbonite, and that's exactly how the Mandalorian makes his living as a bounty hunter, And this is also another thing that I want to go over, is that Carl Weathers, let me tell you, Nick Nolte All the actors involved with this project did an excellent job. You know, Jon Favreau writing, of course, Star Wars The Mandalorian. You can see how much he really cares, how much of a hardcore Star Wars fan he really is. The tone of this movie directly is very much like Star Wars A New Hope, so if you guys like Star Wars A New Hope, it feels very much like that. I want to go over the Armorer and why I like the concept of the evolution of the Mandalorian. So, that's the idea by Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and others involved with this TV series, is that they want to have this concept where each and every episode, or every other episode, the Mandalorian is going to get upgrades. He's going to evolve as a character when it comes to his armor. And we saw a prime example of that when he meets with the Armorer. Now, the Armorer is actually basically a forger, you know, welding different pieces of shoulder pads, knee pads, chest plates, helmets, you name it, for the bounty hunters, right? Specifically for the Mandalorian here in this scenario, where you do get to see the Armorer actually welding a shoulder piece that gets attached to him, which alludes to the image that we saw a couple of months ago that was teased by Disney and Lucasfilm. So, the other piece that I do want to go over is that not only does The Mandalorian feel like A New Hope, but it also feels like something brand new. Of course, we get to explore, you know, Nick Nolte's character, who is basically, you know, the one leading a herd of blurg. The blurg are actually a type of species that we do get to see in greater depth in The Mandalorian that have been a part of Star Wars lore, that we do get to see in more detail now, as Nick Nolte's character helps the Mandalorian by bringing him across the actual land of that world, leading to the big moment, alright, the big moment where we have, of course, the big shootout scene, where we do get to meet IG-11. Now, this is my only concern about Episode 1, is that I was really looking forward to IG-11. Yes, I do know that initially a lot of fans were thinking that it was IG-88, but Jon Favreau decided to make it a different type of droid, calling it IG-11. Now, IG-11 and the Mandalorian, for a brief moment, are enemies in a sense. They go up against each other, but then they become allies for a very brief moment in time, where IG-11 is protecting the Mandalorian. There's a huge shootout. I mean, it was really by far, I think, the best scene of Episode 1 that had great payoff, because of not only what it leads to, and that leads us to the Star Wars lore, that's really going to shock a lot of fans, and that leads us to the moment in which they go inside the building, you know, they burst through the blast door, it falls down, they go in there, they discover a new species, that actually one of which is hidden in there, that is 50 years old. They go toward this container, this pod if you will, that opens up, and the Mandalorian and IG-11 find out that this is indeed the same exact species of Yoda. I know a lot of fans are thinking that it's the baby of Yoda, but it is entirely not Yoda, since this does in fact take place some years after Yoda's death. So, this is the species of Yoda that is being essentially pretty much teased by Disney and Lucasfilm, and exactly where that's going to go in Episode 2, 3, so on and so forth is going to be a very big part of the plot of Star Wars The Mandalorian. Now, the only concern about this is IG-11 got killed so fast because the Mandalorian goes ahead and kills him, because IG-11 states that, you know, he has orders to terminate this, you know, the species of Yoda, and he wants to terminate him. The Mandalorian has a change of heart about all of that. He wants it alive, he kills him, and you can see that there's some kind of bond there with the last shot of where the Mandalorian is pointing his finger at the baby Yoda species. So, what does this mean for Episode 2? Well, this most likely is going to lead to the redemption story. With every single Star Wars project, it's always about redemption, whether it's movies, whether it's animated TV series like Rebels and Clone Wars, or if it's this, the first live-action TV series. The concept of redemption is still, you know, a part of Star Wars, and I can definitely say that it seems like that Episode 2 is going to go over how the Yoda baby species is going to serve as a way that's going to change the Mandalorian's heart. It's going to change his ways and lead him to a redemption arc. Again, there's only like, you know, below 11 episodes for this first season. There's not a lot. There's 10 episodes, I believe. And with that being said, the fact that they are aiming to do a season 2 already is something very interesting, because I gotta say, everything ranging from how it feels like A New Hope, the action, the characters that were introduced, everything was great in my opinion. I think it's a solid Star Wars live-action TV series. The only thing that I have a critique about is the music didn't do it for me. I just was not too impressed with the music. That's my only thing to point out here, you know, for episode 1 of The Mandalorian. Hopefully it gets better as time goes on. The next episode airs in a couple of days from now. I cannot wait to see what episode 2 has to offer. Let me know what you guys thought about episode 1 for The Mandalorian, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.